Hello and welcome back to the MilanTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Samit Paul, and as always, in this current climate, I hope you're all well and I hope you're all staying safe. Tentative suggestions that things could pick up football-wise in May heading into June, but despite the lack of action on the pitch, there's still plenty to discuss off it. A lot of Milan news in terms of transfer talk and analysing players, which we can stay busy discussing over the next couple of weeks. But getting straight into it, let's start off with an Ante Rebic discussion. Obviously had his troubles and struggles early on in the season and turned it around and became very, very decisive in the last couple of months. That's now 7 goals and 1 assist in 18 games for Milan. Devoid of confidence, just lacking quality, gave the ball away too easily, perhaps trying too much. Rebic got it all wrong in the first 3 or 4 months. It didn't help that he was having a bit part role where he was being introduced late in games and struggling to get up to the pace of the game and not having a massive impact off the bench. But a lot of the play that he was producing while he was involved wasn't up to the appropriate standard. And it led to even question marks in January, I think, early January, perhaps late December, about the possibility of ending his loan spell early and sending him back to Frankfurt. Fortunately, he has turned things around and he deserves credit for that. He went from jeers and whistles at San Siro to being cheered and getting a lot of praise from fans when he went on that goal-scoring run, which was very important for us. I have always said that I think he's a quality player. You can see that with his little flashes and glimpses on the ball when he's taking a man on, or whether he's trying to inject a little pace down the wing to get free and get a ball into the box. And obviously his movement into the box late on now and picking up these crucial goals as well, which some of the late ones to win games and obviously a couple to break the deadlock. They're important goals as well, which is crucial for me. They're not just tagging on to the end of 2-3-0 wins. So 100% deserves a lot of credit for the way he's turned things around at Milan. We've got a decision to make, of course, still though. 2-year loan deal as it stands. Possibility even of discussing this summer if we want to move that plan ahead and get something sorted for ahead of next season. But the first poll I had was, has Ante Rebic done enough to suggest that Milan should sign him outright? 73.8% of those who voted said yes, sign him. 20.6% said not yet, more needed from him to prove himself. And 5.6% said don't sign him outright. So it looks as though those that voted anyway, at least on MilanTalk 1 on Twitter, a lot of people are thinking now he's done enough to earn a permanent move. You've seen enough from him to suggest that he can be an important player moving forward. I would probably agree with that, but I may sway to the side a little bit still at this stage of not yet, more needed. If he has a blinding last 12 games of the season and continues to score goals and his confidence is up and he's taking players on and beating them and he looks like a top player again, from what we've seen with him at even for Croatia at international level as well. He has produced the goods in the past. I personally think maybe we still need to see a little bit more consistency from him, prove himself that he can do it over a lengthier period of time. But I'm certainly in favour at this stage. If Milan were to say, let's get this done on an outright basis, I would not have a problem with it. But yeah, fingers crossed he can pick up his form when things resume once the virus situation has eased off and we're safe to continue games. The next player that came up for discussion in the polls on Twitter was Mateo Musacchio. His agent has had a lot to say recently. Very sort of not so subtle hints about not being happy about being third in the pecking order. He got rushed back from injury and had to feature. Then he suddenly dropped behind Kaya and Gabbia's come in the last couple of games. So his agent had a little bit to say, and the question was on Twitter was, what should the future hold for him? 0% of people voting said keep him as a starter. I don't think I've ever had that on any of the polls that I've held on MilanTalk. So yeah, that was interesting. 39.3% said keep him as a squad player, and 60.7% said get rid and replace. Completely agree that he shouldn't have had any votes for keep as a starter. I think we've all seen the vulnerabilities, the mistakes, and just generally the unreliability that he's got. He can always pull out a mistake or an error out, and it tends to be pretty costly. So I completely agree with those that said or didn't vote for him to be a starter. 30% fairly close, I would say, still in terms of whether or not he's good enough to be a squad player or if we should get rid of him and replace entirely. Milan do have options. So if we're going to throw our faith into Gabbia, and you've got Leo Duarte coming back from injury as well, do we keep those two and do we extend Simon Kjaer's deal and keep him as experience? Or do we end Kjaer's deal, don't take the option on him, and then kind of keep Musacchio on to be that experienced second or third option? Whether or not he's happy with that, again, is another point. And I believe his contract expires in 2021 as well, which is obviously a problem if his agent is piping up now and he doesn't get more playing time between now and the end of the season. You'd imagine that they'd probably angle for a move away anyway. But again, 100% I agree. I don't think he should be a starter anymore, whether that's Gabbia or, well, ideally Gabbia for me, but if it is a new signing, then so be it. But Musacchio for me shouldn't be a starter. But there is enough to suggest that he can still be a squad player to fill in the squads and just be cover and add a little experience behind Gabbia if we need someone to step in. So I'm slightly in favour of that. But again, similarly to the last one, if we did get rid of him and replaced him, I would be absolutely fine with that as well. So yeah, we'll have to see if Musacchio has got a future at the club beyond this season. Next up was Samu Castillejo. And credit where it's due, first of all. He's grown into a key role this year. I had major doubts, in fact, last season and the beginning of this season as to whether he really had anything about him. Yes, he's got a bit of flair, he's got a bit of skill about him, and he has shown certain signs where you think there's a player there. But the one thing that I've probably been more impressed about is his work ethic and his defensive work. I think those deserve credit, and he's done a great job in sacrificing himself for the team a lot of the time. So there certainly were positives, but again, the facts and the figures don't lie. So it's still only 1 goal and 4 assists in 19 games this season. For a winger, for one of our key creative players, if you like, that's obviously not enough. We still need more quality in the final third. But again, I'll go back and say that the work that he puts in for the team is tremendous, and he's very important in that way, and he offers a vital sort of cover with his defensive work. The poll was, what should the future hold for him? 30.3% said permanent starter now, 56.6% said squad player, and 13.2% said move on and get an upgrade. So again, for me, I think he's got a purpose about him now. I would say that it's not really worth our time moving him on and upgrading. I think that's something we can live without, and we can focus our attention elsewhere in the squad. Again, with those figures in mind and the lack of decisiveness that he offers in the final third, I'm still not convinced that he's a permanent starter. He's come a long way in the last couple of months, and he's shown a lot more quality. So he's still only 25, 26, I believe. Is this now a part of his process in the next year to 2 years to growing and taking his game to even another level? If he can do that, then fantastic. We've got a permanent starter, and if he can deliver week in and week out, then I'm more than happy for him to if he earns his place, then let him keep it. It's not a problem. But for me, the way things currently stand, although I have been impressed with him and he deserves credit for the way he's turned it around this season as well in the last couple of months, I'm still not fully convinced. So I would agree with the 56.6% of the voters who said that he's still a squad player. So yeah, certainly wouldn't get rid of him. But if there is an upgrade out there where he can drop back to the bench and we can have a proper winger that can deliver week in and week out, if we can even find one and afford one and attract one, then I still think it's probably an area that we can do better. So credit to Samu. Certainly proved me wrong in the sense that he's gone further than I thought he could have. But yeah, there's still a lot more to prove, and he's probably going to potentially come under a bit of pressure this summer if we do bring in a new signing. The final player that came up for discussion on the Twitter polls was Ibrahimovic. So great impact. I think it's 4 goals and an assist in 10 games since he returned in January. We all know the quality that he possesses, and yes, this isn't vintage Ibrahimovic, but he's still shown enough quality in the last 10 games to suggest that he can still play a key role up top for us, whether that's scoring goals, whether that's link-up play and bringing others into play. There is still a lot about his game, and there's still enough in his legs to suggest that this was a right move to make, and there is a strong argument to suggest that we should keep him on next season. He's obviously with us until June, and then there's an option in the agreement to extend to next season. So there's a big decision there for Gazidis in the management. Looking at a balanced argument, though, have been signs of frustration from him, and lashing out at his teammates when he doesn't get the right ball in the box at the right time. Whether it's just a lack of overall quality in getting service to him, or if he's produced a nice bit of play and he's been let down by someone else once he's passed it off to them. You can see him visibly frustrated on the pitch a lot of the times, and that's leading him to do things that perhaps he wouldn't ordinarily do. Yes, he's more than capable of producing a piece of magic, but we've seen some of the outrageous attempts that he's tried to take on goal. Looks fantastic when they get pulled off, but when they don't, it's like probably a better option to go somewhere else rather than try and take it on and be the hero. He has produced a couple of really big misses as well. I remember one at Fiorentina, I believe. There was one in the Coppa Italia, but it didn't prove to be costly in the end. But yeah, there's been a few misses from him. That uncharacteristic as well. You'd expect him to put those away. And he probably should have more goals than he has. But ultimately, I think the experience factor, given it's a young squad, and the quality that he still possesses, and the fact that he offers a dynamic that no one else in the squad can, unless we go out and spend more money on bringing in another striker this summer. I think he's still an important part of the squad, and he's still got a role to play. The poll was, do you want him to stay with his option to extend next season in mind? Seems like a categoric answer. 79.5% of those who voted said yes, 100% stay. 10.2% said having doubts, and another 10.2% said no, move on and think long term. So I get the argument in terms of a longer term plan. He is 38. He's not a spring chicken. He's going to see a decline in his game eventually. That could happen next season, and then it's looking like a costly move considering his reported wages. So I get that argument. I would slightly put myself in the having doubts department as well, just for the reasons that I detailed a minute ago in terms of his frustration on the pitch and the misses that he's been guilty of. But again, I have to agree with the voters again on this one because, like I said, it's just the experience on and off the pitch, what he offers the younger players in training every day. On the pitch, you can see him guiding the likes of Kessie at times and helping them make the right decisions at the right times. You'd hope that the players are being sponges and taking as much of that advice and guidance on board as possible, making the most of him while he's about. You kind of get that impression from comments made in the media, whether it's Rafael Leao or others who have praised him since he returned. You get the sense that he has made an impact on and off the pitch in training as well. So yeah, I mean, I don't see the harm in keeping him on for another season. I think we do need someone like him to get back into the top four. So yeah, fingers crossed that is something that Gazidis and the management make the right decision on and don't get rid of him to leave us lacking in experience even more than we were previously. So just to wrap things up on this pod with a question from Samir Mohammed 72 on Twitter. Are we changing coach? And if so, who are we getting and who would you like? So I think it's going to be a toss-up between either Pioli or Rangnick. Perhaps Spalletti as a plan C, maybe or maybe not. I think what we're hearing through speculation and through comments from people within the club, Pioli's obviously made a very positive impression. There have been slip-ups along the way, of course, but overall, I think the impact he's made, he's given us a bit of an identity, a bit of direction on the pitch, and he feels like a shoot straight down the line kind of guy. If there are things that we as fans pick up during the game for criticism, he tends to kind of air those same opinions and beliefs in his post-match interviews, which I really like about him. He doesn't kind of beat around the bush and kind of hide those things away, shy away from it. He does address things head on. So I do like him. I do think he's done a good job, and especially after the pressure and the criticism that he was receiving when he even got the job. I think he's done a very good job. Rangnick, I still don't know enough about. Perhaps I probably should do some research on him to get a better understanding of what he's achieved and what he could bring to Milan. But from what you hear, from what you read, I think I'd probably be on board if there's a strategy and a streamlined vision from top to bottom. And I mean in terms of Gazidis, whether it's Maldini or a replacement in the management setup, and then that filters down to Rangnick and the squad. If we're all moving in the right direction, we've got a shared culture, a shared idea, we're all having a positive impact and building a squad with a clear direction and identity in mind, then I've called for that for a number of months now, and I think that kind of certainty, stability from the top down to the bottom is something that we really need. So if Rangnick's the man, if he can provide that, then, and I'm led to believe that he's got the track record to suggest that he can be a positive influence and a successful individual to have in the club, then why not? I'll be happy to see that happen. But for me, if you're asking for my personal opinion, it's difficult to see us being ambitious suddenly and going for likes of Pochettino, or hard to see like a top tier coach like Allegri join us in our current state. But I think if I was going to choose one person, it would be Pochettino. I think he's shown at Spurs that he can work on a small budget, he can improve younger players, he can give side an identity which works in modern day football. And I mean that I mean the pressing off the ball, the high tempo, the attacking play, and the defensive sort of coordination and organisation that we saw from Spurs. Yes, they fell short, they didn't win trophies, but to work on the budget, on the shoestring budget that he had to, against the rivals that they had with the money that they were spending, I think he did a fantastic job and deserves a hell of a lot of credit for the work that he did at Spurs. So yeah, there are shortfalls, there are question marks, but for me, I think the kind of club and manager situation there kind of intertwine, and they could be a really good match. But again, like I said, it's hard to see us being ambitious all of a sudden and going for a name like that. He's going to want big wages, I'd imagine. So it's probably a pipe dream. But for my personal opinion, I would say Pochettino. But yeah, I think more realistically, it'll either be Pioli or Rangnick from what we're hearing and reading. Right, guys, that's a wrap for this podcast. I want to say thank you to all those who voted on Twitter, for everyone that left comments. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to the pod over the last 2 weeks. Obviously, that's why I do it. If you guys aren't tuning in, then I wouldn't bother. But the feedback that I'm getting, the comments, the votes and everything, it's all making it worthwhile. And I obviously enjoy it, but to get that feedback makes it even more enjoyable and makes me want to continue doing it and work hard to continue providing content for you. So back next week with the pods. I'm sure there'll be plenty of more talking points, but follow at MilanTalk1 on Twitter to get involved in all the polls and all the questions, to get a shout out next week. MilanTalk.com is the website, daily content, lots of stuff to discuss there. I think I've posted a couple of bits today on Suso, on 5 players that could be leaving Milan this summer. Loads of stuff looking at individual players and more tactical stuff that I'm going to try and get into over the break that we've got at the minute. But yeah, so check out the site, keep supporting the social medias and the YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Like I said at the top of the podcast, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all keeping well. And, fingers crossed, like I said, by May, perhaps June, we'll get some football back and we can really get stuck into some more discussions. So for now, until next week, Forza Milan.